All right. There's Hashem Yisparach with the help of God. God always helps us whenever we do a mitzvah. We choose good or evil. God does the rest, either directly or through angels or other agencies. So God willing, we'll learn some of God's word. It's so incredible. All right, so we left off here. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Ein hara v'yitzara v'sinas abrios motzinas adam min ha'olam. The evil eye and the evil inclination and hating of people removes a person from the world. So we'll be going into the commentary of Rabbeinu Avadia from Barkinora. Ayin hara kamo ayin ra'a. This is like the ayin ra'a that we spoke about before. If you remember, Rabbi Eliezer said ayin ra'a is the thing you have to run from the most. Here we're going to learn why that is so. She'enu misapek b'ma sheyesh lo. He's not satisfied with what is his. And he always looks after what else to collect. Now, this actually could be good for someone who's in the job of acquisitions. So that's using an ayin hara skill for a good purpose. But generally speaking, ayin hara is not a good thing because while you could be selective, the tendency would be to be too selective. So if you leave it to its own device, it's like a train that keeps on going, and when the track's about to stop, the train has to know how to stop going. Otherwise, it could be a problem. Let's continue in the commentary, though. There's another possible meaning. And there are those who explain ayin hara shemachnis ayin hara b'mamon chabero, that he places an evil eye on the money of his fellow, or b'banav, or on his children's money, machzik lo, and he causes damage to them. So, in other words, we're talking about the beginning of the jealousy that leads to coveting, and of course, coveting can lead to, God forbid, stealing or something. So, but here, when it says mazik lo, it doesn't just mean maybe he'll come to steal it. It could also mean maybe he'll cause a spiritual damage, because when a person says, "Why does he have that and I don't have it?" he is causing a heavenly accuser to judge that person and say, God, you gave the Torah to people on earth, and there's a person on earth who's claiming that this person doesn't deserve what they just got. So then the angels are forced to have a trial, unless, for example, if the person he's talking about never spoke Lashon Hara, so then the trial would automatically be canceled. But for a regular person, it immediately creates a court case in heaven. Does he deserve to lose his blessing? Which is terrifying, because the whole fun of a blessing is you get to use it for quite a while, right? So especially somebody who's struggling with poverty, they don't need the first day they get rich again, to start having ayin haras on evil eyes on them. So but the evil eye is not a curse like in the Old English sense. It does, however, awaken a heavenly tribunal based on should the person keep it or not, and it can cause other effects as well. So certainly it's a thing to stay away from. Yetzer hara, evil inclination. We know this well. There's a Gemara that says humans were only created to do battle with their evil inclination. So this is a key important thing. If we fight the bad, we are incidentally doing good. So even if a person doesn't have Torah knowledge, the battle with the Yetzer hara can make them a great person. Remember that Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph was in the prison in Egypt. He did not have a whole bunch of Torah books with him. He fought his Yetzer hara, and he came to greatness. And the prophet Amos, was not a Torah scholar before he became a prophet. It's an amazing idea that even a person doesn't fill themselves with the ideas of the prophets before them, a disciple of the prophets in every way. Nevertheless, he became a great prophet with 9 chapters in Tanakh. So it's all centers around fighting the Yetzer hara. If you fight against bad, you're doing good. So, for example, in current political discussions, for example, getting better education for children is not as good as fighting against abortion from a Torah perspective. Fighting against abortion is much greater because the child has a chance to learn, and even if they went to a bad public school, they can eventually go to college and make up for it. But without life, there's nothing to talk about. So it's incomparably greater to fight against abortion than it is to be proactive for education. So this is not a small thing. And it's also a different teaching style. You notice each of these rabbis have their own emphasis. For example, a couple of the Rishonim, the classical sages, wrote books of mitzvahs, the Targum mitzvahs. They reviewed all the 613 commandments. And Rambam was one of them. And he wrote the positive or productive commandments, and then he wrote the prohibitions. And then the Sefer Mitzvah Skadol, the Smad, who is one of the Balei Tosfos, he wrote it in the opposite order. He wrote the prohibitions first, and then he wrote the positive productive commandments. So by emphasizing the negative first, he was teaching it in a different way. Now, as long as we're on the topic, let's just review a couple of the concepts that we've spoken about before, but it's good to keep in mind. In the next world, you can get there by keeping the prohibitions of the Torah that apply to you, and the actual portion in the world to come is focused mainly on the productive commandments, on the mitzvahs that say the positive productive commandments. So if you're creating a portion of the world to come, you want to focus on the positive commandments. But to make sure you got the right ticket to enter the palace, you got to make sure you do the prohibitions. And we see the nature of when people are going to get a drink of water, unless they're right by a water fountain or they're right by a river, if they're thirsty, the first thing they think about is, where's the cup? They need the cup to get the water. They're only interested in the water, but they know, no cup, no water. So that the cup is figurative of the prohibitions. We need an order to our divine service. The order is the prohibitions of the Torah. And if you look, when people take a drink, usually the cup is not all the way to the top because it might spill on them. The cup is usually a little bit bigger than the amount of water that they put into the cup. And if you look at the 613 commandments, there are more prohibitions than there are productive commandments. There are 365 prohibitions and 248 productive commandments. So we see that the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvos Gadol, he is trying to follow in the pattern of the way the Torah itself teaches the Torah and mitzvahs. It's a different way of looking at it because a lot of people translate either the Rambam or Sefer Chinuch, and so that was from a different school of thought than the way the Sefer Mitzvos Gadol wrote his book. I hope there will be a nice translation someday soon on the Sefer Mitzvos Gadol. It's a very, well, hopefully there's already been one, and we'll find the link soon. But it's a very interesting alternative way to view the mitzvahs. And okay, continuing. V'sinas habrios motzin as adam min olam. These three things remove a person from the world. Sinas habrios is hating people. What does Rabbeinu Bagav Bartanura mean? Say that the Mishnah means when it says hating people. Okay, the first explanation he gives is sinas chinam, hating for no good reason. And it said that the second temple was destroyed not for idolatry and not for murder and not for immorality. The second temple was only destroyed because of sinas chinam, unwarranted hatred. Now, we learn elsewhere that machlokas l'shem shemayim can be good. Okay, let me quote that directly. We quoted it previously. It's in chapter 5. In my edition, it's 17. Chapter 5 of Perkei Avos. Kol machlokas shehi l'shem shemayim sof l'is kayim v'she'ena l'shem shemayim ein sof l'is kayim. Whichever argument that is for the sake of heaven, its end will continue, and whichever is not for the sake of heaven will not. In the end, it will not continue. So, in other words, it'll have a positive effect overall. Yeah, they argued, but they came out with a better policy to feed the poor. Yeah, they argued, but they found a way to make the bridge for less money and in a safer way. So that argument was very good, right? So if the argument turns out to be very good, so we see it comes from arguments that were for the sake of heaven, for the proper purposes, the proper intents. But sinas chinam means a person has unwarranted hatred. Maybe they heard a lie about someone and they believed it. For example, some of the things that the media is saying about the President Trump, some of the negative things, could not possibly be true. I mean, no human can actually do all these things. It's it's impossible. I mean, when his every speech is in the opposite direction, to just assume that he's doing something absolutely without proof, So anyway, we're seeing some of this played out in the politics of today. Let's continue in the Bartanura on the topic of sinas habrios, hating people. Rambam Perish, and now he's quoting Rambam on the Mishnah. Shemois chaveres habrios, that he hates the companionship of humans. And he likes and he loves to dwell alone. He likes to be a hermit. What's the problem with that? Because God loves civilization. Okay, there's a nice verse from Isaiah. we've quoted this one before, but all right, let me just get the book just a minute. Okay, Book of Isaiah. So I discussed with Russell before that after we finish this topic, maybe a good topic to go to would be the Book of Isaiah, and he liked the idea. Anyone else like the idea of Isaiah? Next.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, well, Russell asked a question on Rashi on Isaiah. Russell doesn't like to admit that he's a scholar, but now the secret's out. Okay, so and then he asked, does that mean Rashi is saying that this book is good for the nations? When on talking about the concept of being a light unto the people, Rashi comes up with that it's referring to this book of Isaiah, and so the idea of light unto the nations is pretty profound. So, what is this incredible book that is the light unto the nations? So, at least according to one of the commentators, a big one, Isaiah is a key message to the nations. So that'll be very interesting to study. Okay, so it's Isaiah 45, chapter 45, verse 18. If you have your book of Tanakh nearby. We have quoted this before, but it's especially when you're talking about verses of the scripture, of the Tanakh, it's important to try to make sure you're if possible, reading from a text, because certainly by the Holy Torah itself, because one mispronunciation is like saying a prophecy wrong, and that's a bad thing. Okay, we can go into the details about that at another time. Ki hu amar Adonai borei hashemayim hu ha'elohim yotzer haaretz lo sa hu honana lo sohu v'ra'ah lo shevas yitzara ani Adonai ve'enod. Does anyone have an Art Scroll translation they can share with us? Isaiah 45, verse 18.
Sure. Okay, for thus said Hashem, creator of the heavens, he is the God, the one who fashioned the earth and its maker. He established it. He did not create it for emptiness. He fashioned it to be inhabited. I am Hashem, there is no other.
So God created the world to be inhabited. This is a profound teaching, because this is the opposite of the idea of a pack up the bags and run to heaven before the world blows up thing. This is the whole theme of parts of the book of Revelations in the New Testament is completely the opposite of God's actual word here in Tanakh. Now on this, the Magen Avraham says, from this verse, we also learn that there is a reward for women to participate in procreation. Now we learned elsewhere, Peru, it's if you study the text on it, that's commanded directly to Adam. It's not obligated to the woman to try to have relations if she's in the 9th month of pregnancy or just gave birth. So it's only on the man, if to try to procreate. But we learn from here that there is reward for participation. So, for example, another commandment that there is no reward for a woman when she does it, other than perhaps a spiritual feeling of elevation, like it helps her to center herself if she is in the need of that, is the mitzvah tefillin. There is no mitzvah for women to put on tefillin, phylacteries. If they did in private or in a woman's group, that would be okay, but they don't get any spiritual reward for it. It's only like if it has a psychological benefit for them, and they don't do it in a way that causes a conflict with the men, so that would be okay for a Jewish woman to put on tefillin. But whereas here, there's an actual commandment from the prophets, so therefore there's actual reward for participating in procreation. And obvious, if a person helps someone else to do any mitzvah, even if they had no portion in it, even if there wasn't a verse here, certainly they're going to be rewarded. If someone was starving and you give them food, obviously you're going to get a reward for that, right? You didn't pick up the spoon and put it in their mouth, and they did that, but you did like everything else until that point to get the food to them. So you obviously have a portion in the great merit. So even if there wasn't this verse, we would still know that women would have an important reward for helping men to procreate. But we see here that the whole world depends on this from God's perspective. God created the world to be civilized, to be settled. He did not create the world for nothingness. This also explains a lot why procreation is encouraged and nihilism is discouraged. Nihilism is the opposite of life, preferring that the world return to tohu vavohu, null and void. So the importance of life is that there should be civilization. Greater than civilization is life itself, because then you have the potential for civilization. Without life, civilization wouldn't exist. But what do you do with the life? So be civilized. Now, just because you're supposed to be civilized doesn't mean you have to be an unenvironmentalist. You don't have to destroy the world to increase civilization. But humans have a right to use the world to further civilization, even if it means encroaching on a forest or two. Now, I heard a statistic a few years ago that it was less than 20 years ago, I heard this, that America was using only 3% of its real estate to house people. Only 3% of the United States has actual people, as of like 17 years ago or something, has actual people living on it. And 97% is either forest or highway or something else. Lakes, rivers, mountains. So the whole world has much more space than people think about. You have these modern intellectuals in universities that are so crowded. They have an apartment the size of a closet, and so they think, oh, there's so many people. Well, but if you really look at the world still has plenty of space for more people. So really, it's the way people have formed civilization that kind of feeds into the self-deception that they have to avoid procreation, and therefore they come up with rationalizations to preserve the world. They have to destroy, including embryos. But that's clearly the opposite of God's intent. It's so clear in this verse. Okay, now let's going back to the Mishnah. Just remember this verse. You can bookmark it. Isaiah 45:18. So vital. Even if you didn't think about the potential for bloodshed for abortion, from this, the whole philosophy of Judaism is different. The whole philosophy of the B'nai Noach way also is different. Okay, now there's a third explanation in the Bartanura on Sinas Abrios, hating people. V'anishamati adam kasha shemebi alav Sinas Abrios v'gorim ha'shakol sonim also. And I heard this could refer to a very tough person that brings upon him the hatred of people, and he causes that everyone should hate him. So, like when a person is in a situation where, let's say, they're a guest at a table, and there's right in front of him a pitcher of water, and someone says to him, "Do you mind passing me the pitcher of water?" And he says, "Get it yourself." So that's just being a hard person, and that's unnecessary. That's causing someone to hate. It's drawing off the hatred of people. It's the sina of brios. Okay, so let's just review these three different categories. So, sinas of the brios, the hatred of people, could be hating them without reason. Even if you benefit people, but you always fight with them without cause, pretty soon they're not really going to be interested. So, for example, if somebody was a store owner and he kept arguing with his customers, pretty soon those customers would stop attending his store, even if he has some things that are convenient for them or well priced. The second opinion was from Rambam, that a person, they prefer to be a hermit. Now, if a person prefers to be a hermit, they could work around that by at least donating from afar to charity, helping to support civilization. You see in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18, that supporting civilization is a key aspect of creation. It's huge before God. So therefore, even if somebody was psychologically in need of being a hermit, like somebody came back from a war and they had some mental issues to work out, they could still send out remotely charity and support civilization that way. And finally, a person should not be a very difficult person who causes people to hate them. Okay, any questions before we go on to Rabbi Yossi?
Could I just make a comment on a comment you made about the percentage of the land being used? That,
Sure.
yeah, if I've driven across and flown across this country many times. When you drive across all the roads, that's where all the businesses and things, they hug the roads. So it looks a lot more populated when you're driving than when you actually fly over. And when you're flying over, you really see the vastness of open space. It's really surprising.
Yes, exactly.
I heard
I yeah.
I heard that everybody in the United States can fit in the state of Texas and have 1,300 square feet per person.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
But
So that's
I wanted to ask a question on this and some clarification on when you were saying about you're saying that the idea of the city or city dwelling is good in the eyes of God. Is that what you were saying?
yes, it is. Anything that helps civilization without destroying the environment. Because the Torah also says, don't pollute the land. There it refers specifically to spiritual pollution, but of course, we could learn out rabbinically it's not good to litter and stuff like that, or destroy lakes with pollution and poisons. So it's on God's agenda, but the establishment of civilization usually would come first, unless it's egregious, like turning a freshwater lake into a poisonous lake.
Right.
That's people used to go there for a refreshing drink, and now if they continue like that, they'd be poisoned. So something like that is a very big sin. So environmentalism is good, but civilization is the greater goal, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. As far as building cities, think more like a more modern city, like for example Chicago, not necessarily like Boston or New York. Now Boston, New York, they have very old designs. I was once driving in Boston, and we missed a street, and it took us literally an hour to turn around and get back to the street. And this is just right in the middle of the city. They have a lot of traffic, and it's like designed like a bowl. It's just really you wouldn't expect that. It's kind of like driving on a mountain. Like you have to go all the way around the mountain to get back there in some spots, not across other spots. And then in New York City, you have dead end streets out of nowhere. You have streets that are named the same name in different fashion. For example, in Queens, you could go to 111th Street, 111th Drive, 111th Road, and they're one after the other. So for a person visiting that place, it becomes very difficult. It's for a person who lives there, you just know, okay, I got to go 4 short blocks. But for a person who's visiting, it's like it'll be very difficult. But that is the lesser problem. The bigger problem is that some areas of the city are just like inaccessible. Just they didn't build enough bridges. They built up factories around areas that needed bridges, and still there's no room for a bridge. So you have to sometimes travel 5 miles in a wrong direction and then curve back, and then you could go to the other side of the city. So, and then of course the bridges are a nightmare in New York City. But anyway, but in Chicago, it's hard to get lost in the city of Chicago because you see, Chicago had the benefit of the Chicago fire, which at the time it didn't seem like a benefit, but they were able to make a modern city. So that if you are trying to get to 4,800 Western, you just have to look, is it north or south? If it's north, so you go north on Western until the 4800 block. If it's south, you just go south on Western until the 4800 block. It's pretty straightforward, very hard to get lost. So a civilization that makes sense is what God wants. I mean, that's just an example of navigation. Of course, there's many other things, such as having a good health care, not allowing bureaucracy to destroy health care. There's a couple hospitals in New York City which are some of the best in the world, and there's a couple hospitals in New York City where they actually they leave people to fend for themselves. There's a horror story of a friend of mine. He was in the hospital, and he was in a room with a paraplegic, a temporary paraplegic. His arms were broken. He couldn't ring for help for a nurse. So my friend rang the help for the nurse when he had to go to the bathroom. And an hour later, they didn't come. And then finally they came, and his neighbor in the hospital had soiled himself because the nurse didn't come when they were called. And then the nurse was yelling at him for soiling himself. So not only they didn't help, they were blaming the victim who I couldn't even call for help. It's just the same city with incredible healthcare. It's the same city with almost life endangering healthcare. It's just it's mind-boggling. So obviously the problems of civilization need to be worked on, and perhaps not the way it's always been being worked on right now. But that's why Hashem will send Mashiach, and we see in the in Midrash Rabbah, it explains that Mashiach will primarily, people think about Mashiach teaching Israel and leading them spiritually, but that's what the sages are for. That's what the Kohanim and the Beis Hamikdash will be for, the high priests. But Mashiach's primary job, according to the Midrash Rabbah, is to help the nations achieve peace. You achieve peace by removing discontent. You remove discontent by having actual policies that actually fix things. Now, of course, with public policy, and please allow me to talk about it since I used to teach this in college, but public policy, usually you have to go for a middle-of-the-road policy. If some people are allergic to peanut butter, and some people are protein deficient, so you may have to find some sort of protein dish that's not peanut butter for that party, right? Similarly, there's certain policies you can never ever agree with a certain segment of the population for, because it would endanger or grossly inconvenience the great majority of the people. However, when it comes to healthcare, there can be certain norms, just like there's certain norms for how to run a restaurant in a healthy way. There has to be certain norms for healthcare. And in the current situation, a couple hospitals are taking advantage of the virus out there to get away with having for offended. It's not that it shouldn't be murder, but it wasn't just the Governor Cuomo who sending people to a nursing home, and then they all suddenly got sick. It was these nursing homes not dealing with it in an effective manner. If you were an owner of a nursing home, and the governor sent a bunch of people to your nursing home, and you didn't have enough staff for it, if you were a God-fearing person, you would have to try to increase staff somehow. because it's your responsibility to help people live, to enjoy whatever your facility is. Okay, any other questions? And did that answer your question correctly or sufficiently, or?
Yes, Rabbi, that was I just wanted to clarify what you said, but I like my neighborhood. I can see my neighbors, but I can't tell who they are. That's how far we are from them.
Well, it could be worse. But now there's an anecdote that has an interesting connotation here. Is the story of Rabbi Akiva's, the story of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's rise to greatness, and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's rise to greatness. It came from the same story. So Rabbi Yehuda was walking two sages. One of them was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and they were discussing the Roman government. They saw a beautifully paved stone road. Now, if you look in the history books and illustrations of roads, there was always either a dirt road or a muddy road or a stony road, or like a dried out riverbed, which was a dirt road. But it was really hard to travel because you never knew what kind of a road you were going to find. But the Romans created a uniform road, a stone road. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi exclaimed, how wonderful, the road that the Romans made, look how they've benefited mankind, So Rabbi Yehuda was having an ayin tov. This, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is the most important thing, remember, from last week. But Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said they only do it for themselves, and the consequence of their kindness is violence. Apparently, he was referring to. So, of course, both rabbis spoke the absolute truth. However, unfortunately, or perhaps in the long run, fortunately, the conversation was overheard by the government, and so the Rabbi Yehuda was called to be honored by the Caesar, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was ordered to be arrested. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai took his son, and they went into hiding in a cave. Now, in this cave, they actually learned together for a total of 8 years and wrote the Zohar, the Medrash on Kabbalah. So this is very important for the world, that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Rashbi, would go through this in order to achieve the ability to teach the Zohar. However, why did it have to be in a negative way? Rabbi Yehuda was afforded honors, and he actually became best friends with the Caesar, and he brought much greatness and great benefits to the Jewish people. by Rabbi Yehuda did. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brought great Torah to the world. But the Kabbalah was called the Torah Shebenisra, the hidden Torah. So the Kabbalah, at first, in the first few generations, it was not spread among the people. It was only taught to the great rabbis because of the complexity. The idea of Hasidus, the teaching, Kabbalistic teachings of the Hasidim, is to try to turn Kabbalah into a more easily understood message that you could potentially even teach children Kabbalah. But the regular Kabbalah, which is founded in the Zohar, the Shulchan Aruch says a person should wait until they are either 40 years old or had 40 years of learning Talmud, so they're seasoned enough to be able to accept the difficult concepts without confusion. I met a scholar who studied Kabbalah before he learned Gemara, and he couldn't understand the Torah straight. When I was talking to him, it was like he was just learning English again. Almost, he was looking at almost every quote that he gave me. He was looking at it almost upside down. So learning Gemara helps you prioritize logic, and then you could take esoteric and try to make a full image of it. But if you take only one side of it, you're not getting the other picture. But there are some Kabbalistic understandings within the Talmud itself. So therefore, even if a person only learned Talmud, they're not completely rejecting the Kabbalah. They're just preparing for when the Mashiach comes, and they'll be able to study Kabbalah with clarity. But so we see, but this Mishnah of Rabbi Yehoshua was fulfilled in this story. Rabbi Yehuda had Ayin Tov, right? And he was using a Yetzer Tov to try to judge favorably the good that someone did, even if they're not a good person. They did something good, like if there's a mean grocery store owner, but he sells you food that you need for your children, it's good to say thank you. And of course you have to pay him the money. But he did you a service that's helping your children, so therefore you have to be good to him. Even if he's not a good person. It's simply, in a small way, spiritually, you have a sense of indebtedness to him. He helped you. So just out of a Yetzer Tov to go out of your way, even though you wouldn't think he deserves it, it's okay to say thanks. You don't start praising him because it's prohibited to praise a wicked man. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda was praising the good that a wicked man did. He wasn't praising the wicked man. Okay, and then Rabbi Yehuda had the Brios love him. The Brios didn't hate him. This would go according to the third understanding in the Bartanura. Don't be a difficult person so people come to hate you. Rabbi Yehuda was a pleasant person and people loved him. And he caused benefits to all of the nation of Israel because of the words he said. And in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, when it discusses who could be a possible Mashiach, Rabbi Yehuda's name is mentioned as a prototype. So Rabbi Yehuda's prototype of Ayin Tov, Yetzer Tov, and Avos Brios, love of the Brios, this is a prototype for a person to become an eligible candidate for Mashiach if they're in that category of people. most people are not eligible to be Mashiach, but for those who are, they need these things. It's a good idea. So why did Rashbi have to deal with the suffering? Couldn't he have had a more wonderful situation where he was blessed with a community that loved him, and they nurtured him, and they supported him, and his son and him learned, and they still wrote the Zohar. Why did they have to be with all this difficulty? So Rabbi Yeshua can answer you. Well, first Rashbi judged what the Romans did for evil. He didn't recognize any good. That's technically like Ayin Hara. I'm saying like because Rashbi was, of course, very holy. But we see that if God is strict with the righteous in the sense that he's teaching the rest of the world, if I won't play a favorite for the righteous man, I'm not going to play a favorite for you. So Rashbi wasn't protected from his small aspect of Ayin Hara. The Romans were butchers. The Nazis learned how to kill people from the Romans. But because he did a little bit what looked like Ayin Hara, so therefore that was enough to interrupt his bracha. Next, Yetzer Hara. He had to be outraged at the evil they did. No, they only do for themselves. It was a good Yetzer Hara, but it was the Yetzer Hara Tzaddik, but it was not a Yetzer Tov. He did not have to exclaim in a public place hatred for a government that would possibly kill him if he dare say that. So you can't call it Yetzer Tov. Then Sinas Abrios, hatred of people. We learned here, the third reading of the Bartanura, if you're a hard person that causes people to hate you, that is fulfillment of Sinas Abrios. And then what does the Mishnah say? What does Rabbi Yeshua say? What does he warn? Motziin es adam min ha'olam. Rashbi had to go out of the world for 8 years and hiding in the cave. Motziin es adam min ha'olam. It draws a person out of the world. So the Zohar was founded on somebody recovering from a mistake on this Mishnah. And the prototype for Mashiach was established on somebody following this Mishnah. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So this Mishnah is so powerful and so much connected to the Gula Shlema. This Mishnah of Rabbi Yeshua. Because we see that now, according to Chabad, the Kabbalah is the Torah of Mashiach, right? So therefore, the prototype for Mashiach and the Torah for the time of Mashiach came from people working on this Mishnah. Okay, now even if a person made a mistake. Even if a person made a mistake in this Mishnah, it was still something. Right? Because Rabbi Yehuda mastered this Mishnah, so therefore he immediately brought good and he immediately enjoyed the good too. Rabbi Shimon made a mistake in this Mishnah, and then he regretted it, and his repentance for this Mishnah, for not listening to this Mishnah, led to the incredible gift of Zohar to the world. So in both cases, it furthered Mashiach, the elements mentioned here in this Mishnah of Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, moving on. So we're going to the Mishnah with Rabbi Yossi. Now, when I was preparing for this class, I really did not expect to spend an hour on the Mishnah with Rabbi Yeshua. I thought we would just go through these Mishnahs really quick. But God helps me to remember certain ma'amarim that apply, certain sayings of the sages. And sometimes we're able to add to that. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Himaro Chaberach, Chaviva Lecha Kishalach, Asken Atzmach, Lelmod Torah She'ena Yerushalach, V'chol Maasecha Yiyu L'Shem Shemaim. Rabbi Yossi said, let your money, the money of your fellow, be as precious to you as your money. And prepare yourself to learn Torah, because it is not an inheritance for you. And all your actions, let they be for the sake of heaven. Now, Torah has to be acquired. The reason it has to be acquired is because if it was a gift, there would be less reward for it. And God wants to give reward. The reason why God created a system with difficulty to achieve reward is so that He can give even more reward if you actually acquire the mitzvah in the right way. The reason He wants us to have a reward is so that we enjoy it when He rewards us. If we feel like we're freeloading, so we won't enjoy the reward as much. But if we feel we earned it, so then we'll enjoy the reward more. So learning Torah is vital. Now, I'm looking at the Bartanura. The Bartanura goes on to the second statement of the Mishnah. Let me just backtrack to talk about what the Bartanura doesn't talk about. Let the money of your fellow be dear to you as if it was your own. Now, this is of course is a different thing from what the Chavetz Chaim taught. Chavetz Chaim taught, at least by his lesson, by his example. He had a position where let your fellow's money be more important to you than your money. So the Chavetz Chaim went and he had a store for a while, and he eventually went out of business. So so how could the wonderful Chavetz Chaim not be successful? The Chavetz Chaim, of course, taught the world about Shemir Salashon, controlling what you say, not hurting people with words. And of course, he was a great Torah scholar with halacha. So the question is, how is it possible for him not to have divine blessing, to have utter success in whatever he did? So Chavetz Chaim admitted that what he would do was, in the old days, if somebody ordered flour, they didn't have pre-made packages. You had to weigh it out, and to weigh on the scale, you'd have to have a stone to make sure that you got exactly 5 pounds worth. Just to measure the stone, make sure that the scale was working, and then you could weigh out the flour. So the Chavetz Chaim always inspected the stone and weighed it against another stone to make sure it wasn't chipped, because he was so afraid. What if it was chipped a little bit and I did not give a few ounces to people that they deserved. So after a while, the whole time went to, he was so worried about stealing from people. The only way he could do it was if he gave them more than they ordered. So if they ordered 5 pounds of flour, he would give a bit more than 5 pounds, always. And he did this with everything he did. He would always measure out he gave a good eye towards how he distributed towards others. And he made their money more valuable than his own. Because he could not tolerate the idea that he stole from even one person by accident. Not even by accident. So this Mishnah, though, says that your fellow's money be like your own. Okay, so we see from this that even the great Chofetz Chaim didn't have an absolute protection, a blessing, because he exceeded what the Torah said here in the Mishnah. He did it for a good purpose. But God creates the world with certain norms. And if you are dealing in those norms, you're not dealing in a miraculous situation, which Chofetz Chaim, certainly could have been eligible for, but he didn't try to do that. He tried to work within the norms as per the commandment, working within nature. Within nature, so you have to make the monies equal. What they charge, what you pay, you always have to make sure that you're earning enough from what you charge, not trying to give sales until you're paying more for the product than you're taking back in. Well, Chofetz Chaim always would put people first. He would worry about would they have enough for rent if he raised his price, even if he couldn't afford to. So then he started to give to everyone more food than they were actually paying, until eventually he went out of business. So we see the wisdom of this Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi, that even if you try to be a saint like the Chofetz Chaim, if you're working in nature, you may not be successful, even for a holy purpose. I mean, his saintliness and selflessness was unparalleled in most generations, maybe. But if you want to follow what the Torah says, it has to be more even. The Torah actually says just weight and measures. The true weights and measures. Justice. Justice is not biased. Justice is objective. So we see from the story of Chofetz Chaim, the story from Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, even the greatest of people, if they didn't follow Perkei Avos, they had some sort of a trouble come to their life. It's really powerful. If these holy people are having such trouble, don't ignore Perkei Avos. This is the ethics of the Torah. This is the way of life. But it says, let somebody else's money be as valued to you as like it's your own. So, but why did Rabbi Yossi not say more valuable than your own? Okay, right? Because he could have said what the Chofetz Chaim says is right? Why didn't he say it that way? Why didn't he agree with the Chofetz Chaim's philosophy that the Chofetz Chaim was trying to implement for the world? Through his store. So now, if it's like your own, but it's not your own, you cannot say it should be exactly as precious to you as your own also. Because, of course, that could lead to the idea of jealousy and coveting. So you can't say their money is like your money. But their money is precious like your money. If you say it's more precious than your money, so then there's a risk of the tzaddik's yitzhara, the tzaddik's evil inclination to destroy himself for the sake of others in a small way. So that's not acceptable. But the reverse, what's the reverse? What if somebody's selfish, Well, to a certain extent, that can be okay. So what do I mean? Let's say everyone has okay, so 3 people were walking on a bridge, and then they decided it's a long bridge, they'll take a break and eat a sandwich. So they all put down their wallets, or in the old days, their bags of coins, whatever the case may be. And then suddenly the bridge started to shake in a strong wind. So each person should try to grab his own money. Once he secures his own money, then he should try to grab his friend's money to protect it from falling. And of course, give it back to the friend, not try to steal it. But the idea is, at that point, once he's achieved protection for himself, then he looks for, how do I help others? But it has to start with him. However, what Rabbi Yossi is trying to counter is that a person should not be too libertarian with money. That he worked hard for his money, he deserves his money, and let other people butt out. So a person who's too focused on his own, what's his is his, and what's others he doesn't care about, certainly he's not being jealous or covetous. Nevertheless, he could have easily saved his friend's money from falling into the river. But instead he was like, that's his money. Why should I try to stop it? That is the attitude that Rabbi Yossi is trying to address here in the first part of the Mishnah. And then prepare yourself to learn Torah, because it is not a Yerusha for you, it is not an inheritance. So let's see what Rabbi Bartanero says. Rabbi Vadia. Don't say, since my father and my father's father were wise people. Torah chozeres la'achsanya shelo. The Torah will surely return to its resting place. And I don't have to run after it. No, even if your father and your father's father were great Torah scholars, you still have to run after it. It doesn't make you a great Torah scholar until you run after it. And even if your father and your father's father were not great Torah scholars, you still could become a great Torah scholar. It's not based on inheritance. It's based on the hard work you put in. Because remember, God wanted to create a greater sachar, a greater reward for Torah learning. So therefore, he made it difficult at times, either in volume or in topic, just to increase merit. So therefore, it's simply how hard you study. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, the leading sage of the generation, so he missed many parties and things like that, so he didn't learn Torah. So there may be some sacrifices necessary to become a greater and greater scholar. It depends on what level, but certainly just mastering the basics is something you really have to do, and you have to be able to review it. If a person learned a piece of Torah one time when they were 20 years old, they shouldn't plan to never ever open the book again. A person shouldn't go to learn Torah just as an achievement. They shouldn't try to achieve a Torah degree such as rabbinics just for a trophy in the form of a diploma. It's not enough that you learn Torah as a youth. You have to learn Torah also when you're older as well. So it's very important to just prepare yourself to learn. And then don't worry about how great people were or were not before you. It's irrelevant to this idea. Let all of your actions be for the sake of heaven. The Mishnah says. Elijah says, "Af b'shah shata osek v'chila v'shkia v'derech eretz lo titachi tivkavin l'hamas kufecha ela shetia bari l'asas ratzon konecha." So even when you're engaged in things for yourself, such as eating and drinking, and derech eretz, which usually in this context would refer to procreation, but it could also refer to other things similarly for the body's health. Lo tikavin, you should not consider it it's for your body, but you should drink. But it should be that you should be healthy to do God's will the right way. So this is enabling. Okay, now we use this phrase "L'shem Shemayim" before. It means for the proper purposes, or for actually literally for the sake of heaven. In this case, the proper purposes is for the sake of heaven. The goal is to become servants of God. So therefore, we have to enable ourselves to do things for God's will in God's way. Remember the famous verse, "Machshavosai lo machshavosechem." My thoughts are not your thoughts. So a person has a natural inclination, even if not for evil, just not necessarily in tune with God. Even if his thoughts were not evil, they could be animalistic, which is kind of like evil in the sense that it's not godly, but it's not necessarily proactively trying to hurt people. However, if a human's thought in some ways can become animalistic by nature, and an animal does not choose ethical choices, therefore, a human is programmed after the sin of Adam and Eve to not make a correct ethical decision. The way to counterbalance this and counteract it is to fill oneself with God's wisdom, the way God thinks. Because his thoughts are not like our thoughts if we're acting like an animal. But if we fill ourselves with Torah, then we won't act like an animal. And what's one of the most profound books of Torah on ethics? This book that we're learning. And there's a reward for learning Torah and reviewing Torah, and there's a need to fill ourselves with the Torah's wisdom. So that means, yes, there's a mitzvah to review the Torah, but if you're going to review a book, often this is one of the books I would recommend. My father used to read the entire book of Perkei Avos every day. All the chapters of Perkei Avos my father read every day. So, and my father was a rabbi and an attorney as well. So this is very important. This text that we're learning here is very, very important. If you look at the Gemara, there's much more Gemara than there is Mishnah. And the Gemara itself is only a portion of the actual teachings of the sages of the Talmud. More was recorded. If you look in the Toseftas and the Brises, after, so we see there's a lot of there's a lot more Torah, and there's more still that didn't that wasn't recorded. But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said that of all the ethical teachings, these chapters of Perkei Avos are the ones that have been included in the Mishnah. Of course, Rabbi Yehuda was Mashiach for his generation. So certainly he knows how to teach the world. He's able to teach Jews, and if he's eligible to do Mashiach, that means he's also capable of teaching Gentiles, teaching everyone. Because as we said, in quoting the Bereshis Rabbah, that's in Sadi Ches, that chapter 98, that Mashiach's main job, according to Chazal, will be to help the Goyim achieve peace. Achieving peace, of course, means applying the Torah to your lives and having reasonable policies that don't go out of whack because you're trying to meet this or meet that goal, or you're catering to someone's whims or a group of people's whims. It's just about the absolute truth, and that's what you pursue. So Rabbi Yehuda said, Perkei Avos is something the world needs. Rabbi Yehuda is especially the type of scholar who could teach everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike. So therefore, Perkei Avos is a great, great important work, and it should be reviewed repeatedly. There are dozens and perhaps 100 different commentaries of Perkei Avos. So even if you read it several times, you may never cover all of the commentaries. So try to buy different editions of Perkei Avos, read different commentaries, keep reviewing, because this is such a profound work. Any questions? Okay, so now in chapter 4 of Perkei Avos, Ben Azai teaches that mitzvah grows mitzvah. A mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. And here we're talking about let all your actions be for the sake of heaven. Even if you don't necessarily think it's a part of a mitzvah, it should still be for the sake of heaven. I'm taking a nap so I can study better. I can study the Torah better. But based on using Ben Azai's mitzvah grows mitzvah, mitzvah leads to a mitzvah, if a person increases their intensity of Torah study, then when they say, when they achieve a level of let all of their actions be for the sake of heaven, and since mitzvah or mitzvah, inevitably they will find a way to turn a mundane thing into a spiritual thing. For example, if someone is getting a drink of water for themselves, so bring an extra cup and give a cup of water to someone else as well. You turned it from a potentially selfish thing, and then if you apply it with thoughts, oh, I'm doing this for the sake of heaven. Beautiful. Okay, now your cup of water is taken care of. But did you do every mitzvah you could have done with the water yet? Oh, wait, my roommate, maybe they're thirsty. I'll get them a cup of water. Yes. So now mitzvah bears mitzvah. Because you improved the way your attitude towards your mundane action. Because you learned more Torah, because you reviewed Perkei Avos many times. Now you are not only elevating your cup of water, you have created another cup of water for someone else to drink. You've turned your selfish need of thirst into something that will enable you to learn Torah, and it will enable you to do chesed. And it will save someone else from thirst. Somebody was suffering, and you stop the suffering. So now you have charity and Torah in the same thing. Your cup of water is no longer a cup of water. It is a super energizer to learn Perkei Avos or any Torah. And then the cup of water you gave is no longer a cup of water. It is charity, tzedakah. And tzedakah, it says 3 times in Mishlei Perkei Avos. Mishlei Proverbs. Tzedakah ta'atil mimavos, charity saves from death. So therefore, your urge of thirst, you turn from an animalistic need into Torah for you and mercy for you to them, and thereby gain the mitzvah of tzedakah for you, and thereby save someone from suffering, fulfilling God's conception of increasing civilization, because a neighbor did not act like a hermit, he helped his fellow. And he was driven from his animalistic desire that he elevated. Pretty neat stuff, huh? Let's say you want to shovel some snow. Okay, so don't stop with your yard. Do the neighbor's sidewalk. And then if you do that, what if you found out that your neighbor fell down and was using crutches or something? And if you didn't shovel their path, they could have fallen down again. Instead, you did an incredible kindness. Just because you were trying to do a kindness to yourself to make your house more prepared after the snow. You see, these kinds of things is what we're talking about here. This is the Torah ethics, and this is the way that God thinks. And if we do these things, so then we can achieve a level of God's thoughts. Because, remember, we're prone to not think like God. But we're able to elevate our animalistic desires and turn them into powerhouses for mitzvahs.
Which one of the ethics is that one?
Let all your actions be for the sake of heaven. So that even your most selfish or most, base need, such as thirst. I mean, it's so intrinsic to humanity that it's almost like breathing. You have to resolve the thirst issue within days, otherwise there's a major problem. So it's just absolutely urgent and incessant if you ignore thirst too long. So sooner or later you got to deal with this thirst thing if you got the thirst thing going. So if you do, why does it have to be selfish? Now, of course, if a person made themselves a hermit, that's different. But if they had to make themselves a hermit, if like I said before, if they came back from the war and they had no place to go, or if they are surrounded by people who could try to corrupt them, and therefore they had to go into hermit. There is a case mentioned that if by the rabbis, if a person is surrounded by evil people, he should become a hermit. So there's an exception to the rule. And there are some places in the world where even in the middle of a big city, that's the case. You have to know who to avoid. And sometimes you have to avoid everyone. But in a situation where it's not like that, for example, during a family get-together, when you say to someone, can you pass this, you're actually giving them a potential mitzvah. But we have to do something besides just let the people in the middle of the table who are passing the turkey and the gravy, and what about the people at the edges of the table? Does that mean they're exempt from doing good? No. That means they're actually have a greater challenge, because now what are they going to contribute? The others are the people in the middle of the table are at least doing some form of chesed, right? They're passing the turkey and the gravy. What is the person at the corner doing? Just avoiding burping too loud or something. I mean, it's less of a mitzvah. So therefore, maybe a person at the corner of the table should volunteer. Oh, could I help bring it in from the kitchen? Or could I help clean off the table? And some hosts won't let you, so you have to be more creative. Like, oh, let me tell you about this wonderful Mishnah I just learned in Perkei Avos. Oh, and then you pick one of your favorite Mishnahs, learn the commentaries on that, and give it over. So do something to contribute to humans. And in the current situation where being around people is complicated with the virus, so therefore online, share Torah links, cheer up people, things like that. So even if a person is a hermit, it doesn't mean they're doing something bad. But it just means they have a greater complication to achieve doing for others. It doesn't mean that they are exempt from doing for others. A person can be a hermit. They should still need to do something. If a person was a hermit in the age before internet and telephone wire and stuff like that, so then they can still mail a check or something to a charity. Just don't be only unto yourself. Otherwise, it's complicated, because it's so hard to do a lot of mitzvahs only with yourself. Remember, Bishop Bar Yochai, who was a hermit, at least had his son with him. They were able to do kindness for each other and constantly learn Torah with each other. So it wasn't absolute solitude. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I guess we'll pause at this point. So we just learned about Rabbi Yossi. So next time we'll start with Mishnah 13 on your list here. Rabbi Shimon. Okay.
All right, great, Rabbi. Well, we appreciate it. It was a great class.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And
Thank you, Rabbi.
thank you for your help, and thank you, and try to think of a way to help others. Thank you.
Yeah.
God bless.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye. You too, and a happy New Year.